Oh, we're live. How did that happen?
Yes. You know, was it live from before?
Okay, hi Nisha.
Hi.
Okay, so I sent you the link, which is actually something I put in the Substack notes this week. It's
Yeah.
um, an article in the Guardian, and it's actually something I've read before,
Yeah.
which is also quite interesting because I think if you see this for the first time, it's actually quite surprising to see this that we've actually we're losing we're losing ground in terms of our connection with nature. So so this was actually, so what I found interesting about it was, oh, someone is still checking to see where we are in this thing.
Hmm.
um but when I kind of read it a couple of times, and a couple of things are interesting. One is actually how the the loss of connection also matches the disappearance of nature words. I mean, those are two different things,
Yeah.
but that's also quite interesting because that's another thing that I've read about before, is the loss of nature words in popular culture, actually, even like pop songs and stuff like that. So so that is what has always made me think I kind of want to put that as part of our whatever curriculum we're doing. Words actually are part of an important part of what we do, and actually it may be something that we may want to do more of. So maybe what I might do is just set up some drafts so that we actually start to build some glossaries of words.
Right.
You know, because
Yeah.
the other thing with nature words is actually, I mean, like I know a lot of nature words which are very Eurocentric.
Mm.
Happy as a lark. You know
Okay.
but we actually have a lot of local idiomatic
Yeah.
words and phrases that we should really maybe begin to uh, collect and put into a glossary, right? And I think you're pretty good at that.
I know a lot of the
Your mother,
Malay ones.
huh?
I know a lot of the Malay ones.
Yeah, yeah, that's what I mean. Yeah, I think your Malay's you're a lot stronger than mine, so you probably know a lot more of them. I mean, I had a quick look, and I mean, really, our culture does mirror a lot of European culture. I mean, even things like we have a lot of folkloric stories that involve animals, sun can chill,
Mm.
all this kind of stuff, which a lot of our kids don't really know so much about. And, it could also be interesting to a kid in another part of the world as well.
Yeah. You know
And that's
how
just,
the
yeah,
Rimba's next version, which is Buru, it uses the Sang Kanchil and the Harimau as a power play, and it comes from folklore. And recently, I was just explaining it to one of the foreign tourists that we have that in Malaysia, although you have the mighty tiger, at the end of the day, even he will lose out to the smart,
right,
intelligent,
right.
and
Yeah,
how to say very strategic Sang Kanchil, because he's very
yeah.
small, but he's
Sure,
really
sure. Yeah.
in
Well,
making this.
it's a great sort of way of understanding concepts and
Yes,
philosophies and
metaphors.
stuff like
Yeah, it's
that.
a metaphor
Yeah,
of a lot of things. Yeah.
yeah. Also, I think the other thing is, it's not just Malaysia, because I've looked at children's books from India, which are also quite interesting. And I think maybe that's something we should do a little bit more of. Is actually we are also not that knowledgeable ourselves about our region. You know what I mean? Like I'm sure there's a lot more like in Cambodia and
Yeah,
that
yeah,
kind of.
yeah. It's just that they're
Yeah.
probably not in English lah. It's
Yeah,
probably
yeah.
yeah,
Well, I don't know. Maybe, who knows? We've not dug into it. I think that's the important thing.
I mean, I used to
Um,
collect lots of like books around animals, and
yeah,
all of them are sitting in boxes right now, which is really sad because I don't really
yeah.
have a home. I'm very nomadic at this point of my life, so all
Sure,
my
sure.
stuff is labeled
Yeah,
boxes. But yeah, I
yeah.
have quite a decent collection for
Okay, so I
Malaysia.
think like I said, what I'll do is I'll try and get it set up as drafts.
Yeah,
So that when you just got a minute, just go look in the drafts and just add words, you know what I mean?
can
Because at some point we can organize it and
yeah,
create some value with it. You
yeah,
know,
fair.
because we kind of understand why we're doing it. You know.
Yep. I mean, for me, I feel like this. lack of vocabulary is not just about nature deficiency, meaning that people
Yeah.
don't have enough access to nature and wild spaces. It is also because people are not observing it. Like, you know,
Yes,
I'm
that's true
sitting
too.
here, there's a
Yeah.
breeze behind me, I can hear the ocean and it's going to rain, so I can hear the thunder.
Sure.
But, you know, you know how in Bohemian Rhapsody there was thunder, lightning, very, very frightening. And the way he sings it has
Yeah.
that,
Yeah.
it pushes you
Yeah.
to go, oh my God, why is it so frightening?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then and it's very dramatic, right, as a song. And,
Yeah.
people need to sit in places that give
Yeah.
them access to these things, sounds,
Yeah.
devices by
Yeah.
themselves, to feel it, to experience it,
Yeah.
to smell it. And that translates into language because then they have to describe it to somebody else. And that description, whether written or oral, is because it was so profound that it needed to be shared. But now
Yeah.
we
And
don't spend enough time alone.
I think another point in that is actually our lack of, I think, just a cultural lack of interest in just cultural
Yeah,
use of words. We're very very scientific and technical, uh, and there's poetry, there's song lyrics which you just described, there's literature, there's books. So I think that's also our lane. We got to get
yeah.
people back into this lane of creative thinking about nature as well. So I think this is quite an interesting kind of thing for us to sort of look into, and I've got a lot more kind of avenues that this has opened up for me. Another thing is that, okay, let me pull it up because so he says a few things. One of the things he says is it's serious. Okay. So that means, for all of us, this is serious, not just us in Malaysia, but it's serious, the world over, that this connectedness is missing. Um, I'm just writing up another piece about, more specifically about nature and nature deficiency disorder, which is why we want to do what we do. So
Yeah,
it's kind of a real thing.
yeah,
But he also has some quite interesting new phrases, which is things like extinction of experience, which I thought was kind of a powerful description. If we don't take care of
yeah.
this experiential connection with nature will become something that we only remember and read about in books.
Yeah, 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 yeah. It's a very real problem. Yeah,
Yeah. I thought that was quite interesting. Uh, then he goes on to say that so computer modeling predicts that levels of nature connectedness will continue to decline unless there are far-reaching policy and societal changes with introducing children to nature at a young age and radically greening urban environments as the most effective intervention. So he's actually talking about two interventions,
yeah,
both of them also in our lane.
yeah.
So one of them is actually introducing children to nature, uh, and the second one is actually greening our cities. So he's saying that just 30% is not enough, and I can tell you that 30% is actually the technical requirement.
As a minimum standard,
It's the minimum, yeah. And he's saying we need a lot more to
for sure.
actually fix the problem.
Yeah,
So that's quite interesting. And then what type of nature? I mean, if you're just putting in
it's quality. At
uh
the end of the day, it
huh?
becomes quality, right? Just because we spend time together doesn't mean our relationship will get any deeper. It's about
Sure,
the quality of the time we spend.
sure.
So the same thing,
Yeah,
with everything else. Yeah,
yeah. So I mean, just in my experience of green space, I mean, we fixed up green space, which is more typical, which is, they will assign 2 acres, 2 to 7 acres as a park.
yeah.
But all it is just
What ways?
bunch a bunch of trees and one seeding covered area and then lawn, which is and then it eats up all the expense of all these immigrant workers cutting the grass every
Yep.
day.
Maintenance.
It's
Yep.
not actually turned into real natural spaces, which are interesting that the viewer can go through and enjoy. So that's
And
another.
the space
Yeah,
The problem with landscaping is that what they design is what they want it to be perpetually. It doesn't grow over time. And you remember we talked about Patrick Blanc and how his living walls were designed to begin in a certain state and then evolve over time through the seasons to get into maturity and to establish itself slightly differently from what it was originally designed. Malaysian landscapers, at least, do not have that extended vision. So when people
Yeah.
come, every time you come, you're going to see the same exact experience, that same exact feature. But if you
Yeah.
came multiple times and the park was growing and it was becoming a little bit more unique in specific
Yeah.
areas, it was becoming a little bit more, how do you say, um, it's starting to express different things, like, okay, so this area is a
Yeah.
little bit wet, therefore it's starting to have like a little bit of a ponding effect, or the plants look a little bit more different. And on that side, because of more sun and it's been encouraged to be that way, then maybe it has like more wind tunnels and stuff. So then,
Yeah.
as a consumer, as a
Yeah.
member of public, you're coming to that space over time and you're
Yeah.
experiencing different things. And then you're going to start blogging and you're going to start making videos and you're going to start
Sure.
telling when
Yeah.
I
I
went
mean,
there, there was
and
nothing.
we, and we don't even have the sort of kind of level of interest to make them into real public assets that actually add brand value to a city.
Yeah.
Like this past weekend, I took us up in Desru, and so I was, talking about the High Line, and the High Line is a really interesting thing. It's a very high level design. Best designer in the world came to do the landscape. It became a huge hit. Actually turned into money. It actually changed the economy of that area. So it actually brought money to the city. This wasn't just whereas a lot of the attitudes that I've faced when I've done the park is, oh, it costs so much money, to upkeep, whatever. But they don't think of it as an investment that will actually build income for the city if it's. And just from a design point of view, the Highland is actually quite interesting because there's another garden in Chicago called Lurie Garden, also by Pete Udall.
Okay.
And they're actually, they're naturalistic in
Yeah.
hyphens, but they're incredibly ramped up. So they're actually very theatrical as well. There's a lot of design in it.
Yeah.
It's actually made for you to go, wow,
Yeah. That's
you
feeding that wow factor.
so
They
so that
have
you
that
actually
magic.
so you fall in love with it, you want to keep going back to it, you want to bring your friends to it. That is actually also missing. Our parks are they're not that interesting spaces, and people kind of avoid them. They've become almost part of the negative narrative is, oh, it's too hot to walk in there, you know.
Yeah.
So yeah, so
What is good design?
that's huh? What?
What is good design? If designers don't have that conversation and they don't have the language for it and they don't have the exposure for it, then the question becomes, what is good design, right? And if they cannot answer what is good design, at least
Yeah,
to some extent,
yeah.
then I think it's a futile exercise, because
Well, I
like
mean,
you keep
as
calling
a as a designer,
wild
as a
spaces.
designer, it's quite organized. How you do it. First, you need actually whoever's paying for it needs to know a few things. Also, you know what I mean?
Sure, for sure.
The designer cannot work without that. So it actually needs a certain level of understanding from the person holding the budget as well. And then of course the onus is on the designer to sort of convince the budget holder. And one of the ways to do it is actually to show examples. So, I can show them examples of the High Line. I can show them a park in Shenzhen. I can show them these things. I can show them the outcomes and say, if we spend this much money, we get this kind of outcome. So it is on me to actually sell the, the thing as well.
Yep.
But I have to say, it is a massive climb to even get to that because there's not a huge amount of interest
Yeah.
in treating a public asset as a city branded asset.
Yeah.
It's sort of like, it's something they have to do. They have to put 30% aside. They just need someone to pay, you sort of fit in the budget. And,
Becomes an afterthought. It's not
it's an
the first
afterthought. Yeah.
thing.
Yeah. Yeah. So we have to sort of move in that direction. So it's got to. So my game is I've got to get a great project on my portfolio in Malaysia,
Yeah, that's the only way.
and then I can sell the next one. So that's quite problematic because we couldn't I couldn't complete it with the Bedini project because it kind of got shut down, you know.
Mm.
So now I'm waiting on, you know, there's always a possible project you know, my Hobbit house thing is back on the agenda, so maybe that's so okay. So there is a
Mini
so the
rolling
green
meadow.
space thing. Okay, so
Yeah,
now let's
no,
talk
mini rolling
about
meadow or Hobbit house. Yeah.
the children, the introducing children to nature thing. Okay, and that is definitely our you know our lane that we
Yeah.
actively working on. And so they say that, you know, very broad things like, what did he say? Something about 30 days wild by the Trust, while still important, don't really hold the intergenerational loss of nature connection. More effective, according to the study, are measures instilling awareness and engagement with nature in young children and families. So that's quite specific. That's really talking about what we are really trying to do, right? Right? So, so they're saying that this is actually the way forward. This is the way you stop the rot, you know. And you know, and you and I know this. This is actually our instinct. You know, we know that we got to catch that generation. We also got to get their families involved, and that is
Because
actually
kids
how it
in that
starts.
sense are influencers. They influence their parents' decision making because that's
Sure,
what the kid wants, and the want to appease that. Kids are more adventurous. Parents may be less adventurous, but they're willing to try because their kids are interested in it. Kids also have a lot of power in terms of like, I want to do that again instead of do something different.
sure,
So, you know, they also create this repetitive pattern in some kids who really like certain things. It creates a repetitive pattern. Then they go back and they get deeper and they get deeper and they get deeper. So in that sense, I would say it's so much more fun. Forget the income, forget the amount of work that we have to produce to get the kid in the door and excited
sure,
about the work. But it's so much more fulfilling to teach a kid, to give them that exposure than it is to an adult, because an adult is always filtering whatever they experience. Is this all there is? Is there more? You know, do I need to pay some more? Without actually thinking, being in the moment, being
sure,
in that experience. Kids are always like, if they're in that place, they are in that space, you know? And I think that's where shifts happen, where their sense of data collection, you know, they're just like, they're trying to make meaning out of what they're experiencing.
sure,
So they're just collecting all these like sensory data, vocabulary, you know, data, relationship data. So with kids, they, because they come very open to a lot of things, they also get a lot of things with them, you know.
sure,
And when they come again, they want maybe some of the same things and some of the new things. So you see, like with the philosophy of forest school, where you give kids a 3 to 4 hour block of time, and they do that over like several interventions, and that is what gets them deeper and more reflective and more conscious about what's going on around them. So I feel like, as much as the space is important, the time for kids to be in a space that is safe for to explore is also important. So, you know, I mean, when we were kids, where did we go play? Like the neighbor's house, the yard next door, you
actually,
know?
when we talked about when we were kids, we actually did forest school. You know what I mean? We actually did it in
Yeah,
our
in an
own.
informal way, do it yourself.
You know what I mean? It was forest school informal life. You know, it actually was. We're just trying to replicate it to actually fix it.
Yep,
You know.
yep, yep. And the
Okay,
limitation
so
of space, yeah,
let's talk about
is the
forest
challenge.
school because let's talk about forest school quite specifically. So now that he's actually described forest school as a real solution, yeah,
Mm,
let's talk about forest school because forest school actually means quite a few different things.
yes,
Uh, it means, you know, like when we entered it, we discovered that actually forest school here, and when I mean here, I mean definitely Malaysia and Singapore, is actually a very privileged activity. It's an activity for very privileged children because it's
yes,
expensive. You know,
yes,
it's provided as a private school. or a private offering. And because of the actual nature of the kind of experience it needs to be, which is very high adult to children ratio, is 4 adults to 1 child. You know, Com-
Certification for forest school is also very expensive. So if
yeah,
you think of that and you understand
that's
how
the certification
the
thing. Yeah,
schools are, are costing it, because
yeah,
there is a level 3 and then there's a level 1 and then level
yeah,
2. So typically level 1 is like a parent who is inducted into forest school processes and they
yeah,
participate, assist the level 3 conductor,
yeah,
who does all the programming and all the, the tone setting and the processing of the course
yeah,
of the day. Level 2 assists with equipment, logistics, and more of the nitty gritty stuff. So when you look at it that way, even a parent who is assisting at level 1 needs to be certified at level 1. So
mm,
that's a cost. And so if you're doing a 1 to 6 child ratio, you're looking at that cost, 1L3, 1L2, 1L1, that is
yeah,
a high overhead.
yeah. It's very high.
Plus the cost of the space and the
Yeah,
logistics of getting to the space. Because
yeah.
not all of us have a beautiful garden like yours, where you can be in
Yeah,
house
and
and you
I
can
and I
store
punched
it
those
long term.
I punched those numbers because when I was doing edible part, I spoke to a lot of parents who are actually dealing with paying for kids recreate. It's
Yeah.
it's a real thing. It's a real budget thing, and I met parents at different levels of budgets. Some parents is absolutely fine. So good for them. But
But
some parents,
that's what we
especially if they got more than one kid, if they got two, three kids, it starts to really get expensive.
yeah,
And then they actually also the worst case scenario is they're both working.
yeah,
So they also need this to be actually almost like a nursery daycare kind of a situation for the kid. So if
yes.
you're not providing the full hours that they need for when they're, you know, there's
Yeah,
a,
and
there's
the
a lot of
price
stuff
point that
going
you're
on.
for, yeah. There's a lot of
Yeah,
intangible things that are
yeah.
there, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so it is a private offering. It costs there is a price to it. But that's not what it's like in the UK, which is something we learned when we did the course because the
You
forest school is actually
risk
a
adverse. You're
huh?
absolutely risk adverse. So what they've done is they've packaged it specifically for educators from the mainstream education system who want to do outdoor activation. So
No, no,
they've done the
I think before that an important variable is actually the other thing that is actually limiting here is forest school cannot be offered as a school. You know what I mean? Because you will start to trigger an interest from the Ministry of Education about why you running an educational program that doesn't match that curriculum, right? But in the UK, forest school is allowed to be considered within their curriculum in a certain specific way. We can go into a little detail. I actually researched it just before we uh we went live. Um, and interesting. So that's what we discovered is so the difference is instead of a private situation selling forest school to private buyers, their model is, back to what you were saying is actually training forest school leaders. And the forest school leaders can bring their skill to a government school to do a program that it now actually correlates to a government school program. And it's quite specific. I've not really looked at this before, but I actually looked at it because there is a funding issue involved. But let me pull it up. They're not saying that they're going to fund a forest school situation. What they're going to do is they can tell the school, you can draw from your funding for your PE and sport premium funding.
Yep,
I thought
yep.
that was quite
So
interesting.
yeah, so Singapore works that way. Every school has a budget to do
Okay.
quite a lot of decision making. So the school can decide that our school's theme for the next 5 years is going to be ocean. And they can do whatever they want around ocean. It could be technology, it could be nature activation, it could be inviting speakers in to, tell stories about ocean creatures and stuff like that. So the way funding is regulated in Singapore is very different from what it is here, because here although at the higher level at ministry, they say that schools have access to uh, designing their own activation for co-curricular activities. The teachers and the principals never really act independently of the system. They're always on the apron strings of the education system. They
Yeah.
cannot shift. They
Sure.
have been struggling to shift. And
Yeah.
that's why Rimba was one of the tools that we went to the ministry and said,
Yeah.
look, even if you can't shift at the high level, let's look at the ASEAN Biodiversity Center as
Yeah.
a beacon for us to talk about biodiversity within our region. So let's train our teachers on animals within our biodiversity hotspot area that is specifically linked to a national policy for the Central Forest Pine region. So let's look at what wildlife do we commonly have across the Central Forest Pine. And that's
Can I
how Rimba went
can
to
I come back?
train the...
Can I come back to
Yeah.
Malaysia, because I kind of want to finish the
Yeah,
UK thing, and then I want to ask you about Singapore, because I think that's quite interesting.
yeah.
So here's the UK. So they're saying that you can actually access it through this PE sport funding, and then there's also guidelines on where else you can access funding. So you can access from. Okay, here's other one.
The Singapore, is it?
No, this is UK. So that one way is to actually get it through your actual government school, your government
Yeah.
funding.
Yep.
Another way is actually go through your local council and local authority funding. They may have an outdoor program funding that you can use.
Activation program that
Right.
has specific units for kids. Yeah.
Yeah. Forestry department, parks and open spaces department, charities, working woodland trust, community chest, forest commission, etc., etc. Now, let's take it one step at a time. I can see that Singapore probably, analogous to this, probably has like NParks as a resource for this. However, from what I understand, forest school doesn't fit in as uh, a train concept, right? You have to do their ministry approved kind of training, right? Did you tell me this, or did someone else give me that?
So Singapore, I feel like it is a very parent-driven process. Parents have the
Okay.
money. They want their kids to have the exposure. They don't feel the education system is allowing the leeway of the depth that they want. So, in spite the schools doing really good compared to what we have here, in running those after-school programs on their own in their own compound. And they have external transit school practitioners who come in and run those sessions. Yeah, so they have
Okay,
transit school
I want to
practitioners.
dig into that. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's one. The other one is NParks runs a lot of programming. So you bring your kids to NPark or the Botanical Garden Singapore, you can bring them there, or you can bring them to Gardens by the Bay. All these three park type places have this kind of activation, which is state
So what you're saying is that the parents navigate this. Is that what you're saying?
correct. Yes. And
So
then
what I'm saying the difference in UK is I think the school is navigating this. They can actually say, okay, we need to have this. We will find the funding from either government or local council or something and offer it as a program. I think that's quite interesting.
Yeah, and the other thing about Singapore is there are a lot of individual, independent, outfits who go out and do, for instance, what do you call them? Tidal walks. So they take
But that
people
starts
on.
to fall back into private or NGO kind of work, right?
So so they fall into NGO kind of work, but the NGOs tend to work with the libraries in the local area. So if you live
Libraries.
so if you work in say you live in Clementi, and in Clementi there is a library. The library will collaborate with this type of NGO, and then you can go for like a walk in Bukit Batok, or you can go to some tidal thing somewhere, or you can go to the railway. There's a pond and there's a hike, and they will organize the excursions. The library is the community center.
Interesting.
So they also seek funding to run these activities.
Is that Malaysia doesn't have anything like that, right?
Malaysia's too big lah. If it happens in a locale like Bangsa, in TTDI,
Um,
in Shah Alam, in Subang. It happens in pockets. It's not how to say
so the pocket has to be more evolved. The library, it's like it's
correct,
a very
correct.
driven.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, how does the transit thing work in Singapore? Who's funding it?
So
Who?
transit schools are funded by the Ministry of Education. It
Okay,
is a part of their purpose of supporting families which cannot afford babysitters at home because not all of them have maids, yeah. And so a child will stay on after school hours in a transit school program where they get lunch, they have a nap, they do their homework for about an hour or two, and then they go on to do activities which is designed by the transit school operator.
so
So the
is it
transit
like
school
a
operator
means?
uses classrooms within the.
It's like a means tested social service. That means if you qualify, if you're
No, no,
qualified,
no,
you're a
no.
certain or
Anyone
anyone.
uses.
So it's available to
Yes,
anyone.
but the
Okay.
fee is a sliding scale. So if you have less children in your family, your fee is pegged at a certain rate. If you have
Oh, so
multiple
there
siblings,
there is a fee. It's just okay. It's a bit
it's a
like
sliding scale.
the
Correct.
health system is how. Okay, that's quite interesting. We don't have anything
Nope,
like that, right? Here in
nope,
Malaysia.
nope. The thinking is not there yet.
Okay.
Yeah.
So let me ask you, how does that happen here? Who lobbies for something like that here?
Very
It's
difficult.
going to be if we yeah. So if it's an ambition for us, it's something that we may have to think about actually.
And it's not so easy, yeah, because relationships that were built like maybe 10 years ago, um, because of the politics, like literal politics, like who's the minister, it changes a lot of the landscape. Although there is executive government and then there is the government that is supposed to be there in spite of who the ministers are, they are influenced by all these policy changes or all these like big shifts that a minister wants to enact. um like I was part of the technical committee around environmental education for I think 2015 into 2016. Technical committee met in 2017. It all went out the door because we changed minister and we changed prime minister, we changed
Right, that's a
government
problem, right?
party. Yeah,
Yeah,
the whole Barisan Nasional stepped down, the Pakatan came up, and it changed the whole landscape. And then Pakatan
yeah,
went down
yeah,
during COVID, and Barisan went back up again, and we're
yeah,
like,
yeah,
huh?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
We
Okay.
spent years building that relationship, and that's how we
Mm,
ended up teaching environmental education, conservation, biodiversity to schools around the Central Forest Fine because
mm.
the head of the technical committee of biodiversity knew we were already championing this for multiple years before that. So they just
Let
put
me
us in the door, put us in the room with Frim. Yeah.
Okay, so let me go back to the transit school part because you were working on that quite actively,
Yep.
when you were working. Yeah.
Yep.
And I want to understand, because you went in there and the people that hired you had this forest school background. Were you selling it as a forest school thing, or did it fit into another kind of a programming
So
description?
the work we did around Forest School was dedicated to private interventions where kids from special needs school or kindergartens would take up like a 12 session program, and that would be in their school or at a park near their school, and then the forest school leaders would run the sessions there. So I didn't design many of their
No, no, but
activities.
this is not the transit school stuff, right?
No, 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 no. So
Okay, I
this
want to know about I want to know about transit because this is
yeah,
a
so my
private
scope,
issue.
yeah,
In the
so my
transit
scope
school, in the transit
involved
school,
training. Yeah.
in the transit school you were developing some outdoor uh, nature
So the
based
modules
learning.
there were character
What is
development,
the what is the
environment.
who sets the criteria? What are you trying to match that to? Are you trying to match it to a Ministry of Education criteria for something?
Sure, for sure. If not, it doesn't get into the transit school process. So the criteria
So what
set
is that
was the
criteria?
ministry.
Is there a broad
Getting
idea?
there. I'm getting there.
Okay.
So the Ministry of Education's main focus area was character development, and character
Okay.
development required certain touch points. And then the addition to character development was the nature aspect, and the nature
Okay.
aspect was
Yeah.
qualified through STEM education,
Yeah.
because their value for science education is so high that if it didn't have any STEM linkage, they would, to a large extent, consider it okay. This is not such a high priority learning process. So character
Mm.
development meant that they understood the ethics around a lot of the things that they were exposed to.
Okay, you
So,
know
for
what I
instance,
find interesting about that? What I find interesting about that, because that contrasts with the UK situation saying, okay, you can take this money if it's for outdoor activity and sport. Singapore is saying you can develop these programs if it's for character development. Is that
yes,
what I'm
yeah, because
Yeah, that's
global
quite interesting.
citizenship for them
Yeah.
encompasses
Yeah.
skills, exposure, language,
Do you,
ethics.
do you, do you think
Yeah,
that's a good I mean, let's say we're in the business of trying to get funding to do this, right?
yeah.
Do you think this Singapore model is quite a good one to pitch? Because it's Singapore, it's right there. They can go and take a look at it. We can show them stuff. Or do you try and access it through this outdoor PE school thing? What do you think is the right
Then my
approach here?
question will be, where would you do it? Would you do it here?
So
That
you
means
think
we
it'd be
going to here, or do we go there and run it? Because that has a cost difference.
well, we're always going there because it's either the school or the transit center, right? Forest School is either at the school or the transit
Right. So
center is
this program will be delivered in Singapore. So if it's delivered in Singapore,
yeah.
then I would say use the UK model, because then you won't compete against a transit school process.
Well, no, I'm actually not talking about. I'm not trying to sell it to Singapore. I'm trying to figure out how you sell it in Malaysia.
I would still go with the the UK model.
So you think it's better to go the path from the Ministry of Education and try and get forest school into schools and not try and say, why aren't we doing more transit centers? We've got the perfect kind of soft skill learning programs for these transit centers.
These transit centers in Singapore
Yeah.
are, the bids go to the Ministry of Education. The ministry decides which operator runs
Um,
which school program. Here,
yeah.
transit centers are private. It is not in the school. It's in
Right.
a private premise.
Yeah.
So your
Yeah.
kid gets
Yeah.
picked up from school, dropped off at the transit center, and then later when you're done with work, you
Yeah.
come and pick the kid up. So that is the holding space makes the difference. Yeah, and
That's
that's what the
interesting
ministry.
because we're not there yet. We're not like Singapore saying, you know what, we want to pay for socialized this social education
Yeah,
and help you with literally with daycare. Because
because
that's really what it is,
to
right?
Singapore, its manpower is its largest GDP.
Yes, yeah. But
They
don't
are
you think
investing
but
in
isn't
their
that the
future
same
to
problem?
train their kids.
Don't you think that we have the same problem here,
We do.
like in
We
Kuala
just
Lumpur?
don't have the brains for it. Our people in ministry are not thinking about it that way. Yeah, I mean, I wrote the
Okay,
stuff, right? And I'm telling you, a child going through that process will
yeah,
be a lot more empathic, a lot more aware of their decision making
sure,
compared to 50% of the adults in Malaysia.
yeah,
I am not being, I'm not
yeah.
exaggerating. It's
Well,
because
also,
the scaffolded process is done
yeah.
so smoothly to get
Yeah.
them to think about everything every time they make a decision.
Yeah, but also the quality of the education is so much higher than what you would see them do in a tuition center here. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just rote learning and just trapped in classrooms and there's no real knowledge. Whereas I could see when I was watching you do this stuff, I could see you're already building like knowledge programs, right? Really interesting modules so that they could spend that time, which would otherwise be wasted waiting for their parents somewhere,
Yeah. So like, I was just going
into
to say that there is a section in the transit like area where
yeah,
there's just like boxes of Lego, just Lego, right? Some have challenge cards and say like,
yeah,
could you build okay, let's just simplify, yeah. But could you build a city with aqueducts and farms connected to buildings and playgrounds? And so the kids will work on that for like a week. And then whatever they finish in a week, they will get assessed. And this is things that they will just take a tray, they will start building, and then they will put it back in the shelf, and then they'll come back tomorrow and they'll keep building it over a week. And then their I guess their homeroom teacher would check it and go like, oh, okay, so they've done the aqueducts, so they've laid out how the city spreads out, this town spreads out. They've set up the farm. Oh, but they have no farmers, they have no houses, and then that becomes the conversation that they have with the kids. So you guys were so excited about moving water, but like, where are the people? Where do they live?
Can I ask about transit centers in Malaysia? So there are transit centers in Malaysia? There are places like that in Malaysia?
So they do have transit centers.
Are they like tuition centers?
Slightly different from tuition center because the kids get fed and they can do their homework, guided to do their homework. And
is it an expensive proposition? Is it expensive?
Pardon?
Is it expensive?
I'm just trying to think of the rates. I don't think my rates are current. I think my rates are like
okay. You know what? Let's talk about this again because I'm quite interested. I'm just trying to understand where in the which tier we're looking. Because we have a lot of private education here, which is not. It's not all luxury Louis Vuitton branded. Like Marlborough. I mean, there's actually some lower rungs to it.
Yeah.
I would imagine that price point works for a lot of people.
Yeah.
And transit centers make sense, if it's pitched right. Yeah. It's an interesting area to sort of kind of look into.
I guess if you're looking at a transit center, location would be a big factor because location in terms of how do the parents or the logistics people get to you. So if they're picking kids up from school and they're dropping them off at your center, so that's one part of the consideration of location.
Yeah.
The other thing is, if you're going to do nature-based education, then it needs to have a pocket park nearby. It needs to have places that kids can experience these, and if you have that, then another thing that will build into your price point is, are the teachers doing this babysitting the kids, or do they have the kids?
Right, that's an important point. That's an important distinction. Yeah. Are you actually providing value here? Yeah. I mean, my first thought is actually it seems like such a obvious thing to be baked into developments. Like a medium to high end development. You bake in a composting center. You bake in a transit center. You're offering value to the parents. Right.
The challenge is when you look at development, and I've worked with like say the Sime Darbies and the developers.
Yeah.
They are to a large extent quite political as well. And the way they select vendors are also flavor of the month. And at the end of the day, the crux of it really is once the development is finished, complete, settled. So they usually select all these vendors when they are in the development phase as part of marketing. So remember the first project I ever did was Si Hoi Chan. So they had us come in and program the whole clubhouse space with them. When we designed that, we co-designed that with the landscape architect and the architect and the people who would then run the clubhouse as a marketing space for the sale of the units. All of that programming ended at the point where units were sold. So at the point residents were in, right? They then have to hire a joint management board to operationalize all their maintenance, all their, quick rents and all those things. And those people coming in never know that.
Yeah, I understand that. Yeah.
This program doesn't exist.
It's a weird situation, right? They're racing to get to that point and then just hand it off to the tenants who have to form a.
And the thing is, the JMB will never prioritize programming because they're just trying to make sure that they have enough people moving into the building. Keeping all the rules, these new rules, optimized and managing all the glitches of a new building. So for 4 years, they are only focused on that. A lot of energy goes to that. And as the building starts to fill and more residents come, you're also dealing with resident behavior because they're coming from different developments before, different neighbors before. and they're coming here and they're clashing because I may not like your music. you know, I want to park my car
Yeah,
where I
they
want to
turn
park my
into these
car.
political, scary.
So
Yeah,
if you had a new development going through that process, but you had
sure.
a solid community program, it will cost you a lot to start because
Yeah.
there's not enough subscription. So you'll be
Okay.
subsidizing it a lot. But
Yeah.
over time, as there's more subscription, you reduce your subsidy, and then the community has ownership of the program. So this is programming. But none of the developers I've worked with have the
Yeah.
stamina or the
Okay, but
foresight to
you're talking about properties, right? What about if it was a mall? Because that's quite interesting too.
But people have to get to the mall. They
Huh?
have to drive to the mall. If it's in your neighborhood,
Well, I mean, you have to
it's
get
so
to
much
any
easier.
transit
Your
center.
kids can walk to the
You have to
center.
get to any transit center. That has to be arranged at some point, right?
I
You
mean,
just have to
my only
you
issue
have to
with the
get from
malls,
this because what I'm thinking is actually malls are trying to they want a hairdresser, they want a school, they want a you know I guess the question I'm asking is transit center an important thing for the future? It's like not a daycare, but a holding, uh, soft skill
it's
educational
a
space,
resource, community resource space. Because then what you gain from it being not so if it's a transit center is very specific to kids of a certain age, but if it's a community resource center, then you have multi-generational interactions. So you have the elderly, you have the teenagers, you have
yeah,
the kids may need more hands-on like care. The teenagers just need space outside of home. They need a
yeah.
third space which is safe, and
I would think
the
I would
elderly ones
think
are
this.
also just activities.
Yeah, but I think the transit center is quite specific. It's for us younger to a kid to
Yeah,
a young teenager. I mean, it's quite a bit.
for malls. So what I'm
Huh?
saying is the context for malls. A mall cannot just do a specific age group because then for
Why?
the cost of the space, the footprint, it's commercial value footprint, right? So they need to be
Well,
doing a
I
lot
don't
more.
know about that because it really depends on the perception of what value it brings to the mall. You know, if it brings foot traffic to the mall, it actually has value. Parents are picking up. That means they're spending time at the mall, eating at the mall. There's reasons for them to
I, I've
actually
seen I've seen a couple of it can be considered transit centers. They are basically coding schools in malls. So kids come
right.
in and
Yeah,
it functions like a transit center because they come in after school, they have their lunch at their cafe, and then the
yeah.
kids go into a coding course, and they do this for like I don't know a year or 8 months or whatever it is, and so every day they do a different part of a project or they do different things around machine learning, or whether it's language or it's connection or it's physical building, right? And those STEM centers, so I would just generalize them as STEM centers where you learn how to use technology and do coding. They do have a specific age group, but their centers have like really good tech people. So that's where the costs come in. So they don't babysit children, but they're teaching technology. So the technicians are expensive. So but that's tech centered. And I think you get, and then
Well,
they run
it goes back to whether you value this idea of a transit center teaching a nature based type program. You know what I mean?
yeah, for sure, yeah.
At the end of the day, so that work is actually partly our job to sell it, and then also partly their job to be able to recognize it, as something
It needs
valuable.
the reach and the pull,
Yeah,
both.
yeah.
It cannot just be reaching
Sure.
without that
No,
pull. The
absolutely.
pull
Yeah,
needs to
yeah,
happen.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, I think we're getting up there. So I think I want to go to one last topic, which I thought this was interesting. But we need to get back and keep talking about this because I think there's a way forward for us. This is quite a serious issue. You know what I mean? We're not just doing it to have fun. It's not. You're not just doing it because this is a
This
problem
is
for
remedying
society.
a bigger problem. Yeah, we're trying
Yeah,
to remedy
yeah.
for the problem. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so we just spent a little time on this last thing. A study found that people in Sheffield, on average, spent just 4 minutes and 36 seconds in natural spaces each day. Increase that by a factor of 10, and people are spending 40 minutes outside every day. That
I
may
just
be
can't
enough.
remember how Sheffield looks like. Okay,
Huh?
what was Sheffield? Sheffield is a student town. Okay.
Sheffield, it's like an old industrial town.
Yeah.
Yeah. I
Is
Kuala
it better?
Lumpur, I think Kuala Lumpur would actually be, not unlike it. But what I thought was, I think what's interesting is that this is how bad it is. It's like 4 minutes. And then I thought, okay, if you increase it to 40 minutes, that's pretty good. And I thought, even though I do this for a living, I'm not outside for 40 minutes.
Are you sure?
I might average 40 minutes. I might average an hour every day.
Yeah.
I might average an hour. But that's because of what I
You don't
do. But
feel it. You don't feel it because you're doing it
yeah,
every
yeah,
day. You don't feel it.
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I'm someone who works in this, the business of being outside. So I'm thinking for someone who's not, actually they may be closer to that 4 minute thing. Especially if they're also trying to avoid the outside, which is what a lot of Malaysians do. You're trying to get into your black screen air conditioned car, into your air conditioned, destination, right? So it is quite problematic. Yeah.
I feel like
And
a lot of guests who come here, who sit in our porch and walk through our yard and, just hang out at the beach. Um, I think they can't even articulate what they feel
sure.
and what happened to them after being out here. Like they go
Yeah.
back, they're like, I don't know, I feel so relaxed. I'm like, okay, you know,
Yeah.
because they've never been in a space where you're not moving, but everything else is. The leaves are moving,
Yeah.
the wind is blowing,
Yeah. I mean, that's an actual
there's
scientific
sound.
thing. It's a
Yeah, there's
scientific thing. I mean, I kind of design on that premise because I think when we live in cities, the grid actually oppresses us in a very specific way. I think we become prey and predator. I think we're looking at the world through this
yeah. Your
constant
instinct, the
alert.
survival instinct is
Yeah,
heightened a
because
lot.
you are in this situation. Whereas if you're actually in nature where there's so many stimuli, you actually let go, and that's why you feel more relaxed because you almost it's like 5,000 leaves moving, a little bit of a breeze, 20 birds singing, all that stuff is really changing your brain, never mind and then you're changing
Breathing,
your,
your breathing changes. Your
yeah,
breathing
yeah,
absolutely changes. You go into deeper breathing. You are actually feeling the temperature of the air as you breathe. It's not something that you don't think about because it's so different. Yeah.
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 Okay, so we're up to an hour. So I think let's just end and let's loop back to this thing that I think let's begin this work by building these glossaries because I don't think they actually exist right now for a Malaysian or even a Singaporean to have like a really good, because then, like I said, there's a lot of words and there's a lot of idioms and metaphors and stuff that is very Western centric, right?
Yeah. I had a
Uh,
Brazilian friend who did English literature at University Malaya, and his focus was nature and environment.
cool.
I may go knock on his door because he had like a
Yeah,
whole bunch of like
yeah.
poetry and stuff. And I remember borrowing him some of my books, and yeah, he had like uh, his thesis should be available somewhere. Yeah, yeah,
I mean, it'd be great to sort of build some content. I mean, like I was, when even if we start small, like which is where I'm at. I put together just these small guides which are on the site, and
yeah,
I remember talking to Shamla about it, and it's like, most parents don't even have that as a tool. Here are 10 local birds. So when you're out, you've got access to a little bit of content that says, hey, can you identify,
yeah.
can we identify 10 local wildflowers, 10 local birds? And I think that can be extended. That can be much deeper and wider. And that is something that you went into like in the deep end with Rimba, where you actually have a very full glossary of uh is it endangered? Is What's the technical
Yeah,
term for those?
most yeah. most of our animals are on the IUCN endangered red list.
Yeah,
So they're all
yeah.
endangered.
And they are local. It's like it really
Yeah,
is
mostly endemic.
important.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's important information. Yeah. So that's actually so I think there's like a full deep dive right down to just simple guides that get people into this.
Mm,
So okay.
awesome.
And one other related thing to the words is maybe think about that when we are doing your modules for the edible education because I think there's a lot of words in landscape
So
and
you to press into 45 minutes.
yeah, yeah, that has to be worked out,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah. All right.
Will do.
Okay. So I'll talk to you soon.
See you soon.
Have a look at the outline and then get back to
Yes,
me about
yes.
the
And I
new
need to buy my
outline that
bus
I.
ticket. I
Okay.
need to buy bus tickets as well. So I don't know. Is there a train happening to JB soon? ETS to JB. Is that something I heard right?
I think it's 2026, is that
Really?
something?
This year? Not
Or
September.
is it the end of 2025? Yeah.
I want it now.
Yeah. Yeah, so get your tickets. We're nearly there.
Okay.
Okay. All
Awesome.
right.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye bye.